Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of Tice's Tech Track, the podcast about me documenting my journey on this startup and building my own online businesses journey. Yeah, that's basically what this podcast is. Primarily a way for me to document my journey on building wealth from online businesses and basically making myself financially independent. And in this episode, we're kind of going to continue on where I ended in the last episode. So if you haven't listened to the last episode, then please do so, episode number 9. This is going to be part of like a little mini series called, what did I call it? Like building a mega project, because that's what I've been doing for, I would say, like 7 or 8 months. Spent hundreds of hours on an app developed with an American friend of mine. And yeah, in this 3-part series, we're going to go into basically catching you all up on what has happened over these months and where we are standing now. In the last episode, I mostly talked about the lead up. So I mostly talked about like how sort of me and my American friend got together and what our relationship was like even before that, because we've known each other for like 5 or 6 years now. So that relationship is going back actually, I think it's pretty much 7 years at this point, which is pretty crazy. And so, yeah, the last episode was really just catching up on basically what has been happening, because I also haven't posted a Tice's Tech Track episode during that time as well. And so in this episode, we're going to go into like the main event, basically the main thing that I had been working towards since April of last year, and this happened in October of last year, like end of October. So it's been a couple months as well now. So I have to sort of go back in time mentally and sort of recall some of the things that happened during this trip. It was an amazing trip. I had a lot of fun, learned a lot of lessons, but overall I experienced this trip as extremely positive. Definitely an eye-opener for me, and yeah, we're just going to jump all into it. So to start off, just a little summary of what I talked about in the last episode is me and my friends have been working on a project together. It's an app idea of his. He basically came up with it about, 6 or 7 years ago now. And 6 years ago, I built an initial version for him as well. So he basically sort of hired me as a developer to build this app. So he already had this idea for quite a long time. And it's actually pretty amazing that during those 7 years, there has not been a main solution like this. It's still not really there. So it's pretty cool to see that we still have that potential with this app. And so for about 5 years, this project lay dormant. We didn't really do a whole lot of... we both kind of went our own ways. We didn't really talk too much about this project anymore because we were both busy. He was busy traveling and I was busy working a full-time job, my first developer full-time job, which I still have today. And yeah, about a year ago now, because right now it's like March of 2025, so this is going about a year ago now, we started talking about this app again, because we were both sort of in a situation where we were looking for something that this project could bring us, which is 1, a source of income, and 2, especially for me, having like my own sort of startup and having like an app that can be marketed to people. So this was a really exciting opportunity. We were in quite a unique position, the both of us, because he has lived in China for pretty much a decade, and I am living in Taiwan. And so we both kind of have an idea, or at least have some feeling for this part of the world and how things run here. For the most part, I guess we still also have a lot to learn. So it's like, but at least we have like, I guess, more of an advantageous position than your average Joe in America who doesn't know a whole lot about what China is about, like, socially and culturally and that sort of stuff. So yeah, we both basically sort of came together again last year in April. I made a big jump by, I think we were just talking about this seriously for about 3 weeks, to actually go to China and go to the fair and meet my friend's wife there, who is Chinese, and she works in this import-export world. So this is an app for the import-export world, which was very interesting. It was very intense. I remember I was there for 3 days. I was kind of thrown into the deep end of the pool, as you can say. Was a bit difficult at times, but it was very valuable because I learned a lot of lessons there that otherwise I would have had to learn in October when we returned to this import-export fair in China. And so now going back here a second time was actually a lot easier, which was very cool. It also helped in building the app on the way to this trip that we were undertaking in October. So it had multiple advantages to do this in April, which is also a good tip for you. So if you have something that you might think can be, of use or can be advantageous in the future for you, beneficial, but it might take a little guts to do it, then do it, So this sort of fit into my schedule. I mean, I'm also working a part-time job, so I had to work a bit more for a couple of days, but that afforded me to take leave for these 3 days and fully focus on getting to know everything there is to know about import-export with China, which is a very, very interesting world. So anyways, I did that in April. The app wasn't nearly finished by that time. We basically just picked up this project again. And over the next month, since April, I basically worked on this project pretty much 100% of my free time. Because, I'm working a job, so I was doing like 4 hours a day on that job. And then the rest of my day was spent on improving and building this app. At first, it was still a website, and I have no knowledge of app development, but I was able to figure out how to turn a website into an app, which is pretty cool. Maybe we can talk about that one day. I used a service called Capacitor for that, which is pretty interesting. And one of the amazing feats that happened, I think just like a month before we went to China, was we were able to get this app listed in the App Store, which is actually pretty difficult. It's almost like, you ever have to do like a visa application where you have to like submit an array of documents, like your bank statement, your birth certificate, or like, ridiculous stuff like that, just because of the bureaucracy. I kind of felt like that, having to build like an application for listing our app in the App Store. Like we had to be very detailed about what kind of data we store and that sort of stuff. But once we provided all of that data, it was actually very quick and easy to get listed. And I also feel like once you're in, like once you step in the door of the App Store, it's very easy to like just carry out updates. Like that's a lot of a quicker process. Still not as quick as a website. Like on a website, you can basically be live within seconds, right? Like you have an update to your website and it can be up there in the next, 10 minutes, and it can be live for everybody. While with an app, that is a lot more difficult because you have to go through a review process, which can take a day. So sometimes it takes a day for an update to come out. And then you got to make sure that everybody downloads that update as well. So if you have like a critical bug in an update, then you're pretty screwed, man. Like it's no fun because there's also no way to downgrade. So people just have to wait for an update to come out, which I don't know. I have some opinions about app development. I'm not a huge fan of it, but for this particular project, it was a huge requirement to be listed in the App Store because, as it turns out, if you have an app like we were having, like a productivity app, sort of, we just had to be listed on a website, or be listed on an App Store. So we had that in the pocket. Android Store was a bit more difficult because Google Play Store is blocked in China, so we couldn't list on there. But we had to. But we tried to find like some of the app stores, some of like the Android stores that are there in China, which are like Huawei and Xiaomi, I think are the main ones, or like Tencent. But we didn't really press forward with that too much. So that's still an ongoing thing. So anyways, that happened just, I think like a month before. During this time, I remember I was working a lot. The nervosity for this trip was quite high. Like I mean, I wasn't necessarily very nervous, but it was just more adrenaline, because this was a big thing. Like my friend was going to be flying over from America to China for this specific thing, So it was quite a big thing, and I didn't want it to fail. It almost failed, which is pretty crazy. But so yeah, I was quite high on adrenaline. I was working late nights. I'm on a bit of a crazy schedule here in Taiwan because my girlfriend, who is now my fiance, is working a job at a restaurant which opens till like 2 a.m. So she usually gets off of work at 3 a.m. And she usually starts like in the late afternoon as well, like 5 p.m. or sometimes even at 9 p.m. So she's got on quite a nocturnal routine. And for my day job, I have my meetings also in the afternoon because of the time difference. So me and my fiance are decided to be kind of like in sync with our schedules, and so like we're usually sleeping at like 4 or 5 a.m. and then waking up at like 2 or 3 p.m. So it's like it's a pretty crazy schedule. It was actually turned out to be quite nice because my friend Matt was in the USA, and he was usually up in the morning, so we were kind of like working at the same time as well because I was working like late at night, sometimes until like 2 or 3 a.m. And in America, there will be like 12 hours difference. So there'll be like 2 or 3 p.m. So it actually worked out in that regard. But he went to China a week before I went to China. And so then our schedules were actually a bit more meshed up. But that was actually one of the worries of Matt was like, will you be able to sort of like adjust to a normal schedule again? Because like in Taiwan, I had this crazy schedule and he knew about that. And in China, like we had a pretty early schedule, like we wanted to wake up on time and go to the Canton Fair on time because it was open up at like 8:30 or 9. So we wanted to just be there on time, which in the end turned out fine. Like I think it was mostly the adrenaline that sort of helped me with this because I was quite nervous for this trip. So anyways, we're almost at the departure date, and there's one thing I want to mention here that I kind of regret now, which is there was one feature that Matt really wanted, and I also kind of really wanted, which was where you can download your personal data. So basically this app holds a database reference of all of your item inventory. So let's say you are a factory owner and you have like 1,000 items that you created, like 1,000 SKUs. You can put them all in the database, but the database is of course on a server. So you need to be having good internet connection on the fair if you want to, for example, showcase certain details about your items. And this just not always works out, especially because the Canton Fair is like, it's a huge event. Like it's a huge exhibition hall. Like, there are like thousands and thousands of people there. And so the Wi-Fi can be a bit spotty at times. And that's exactly what you don't want when using this app. So there was a feature here, which we were thought of, which was that you can download all of your item inventory data, and instead of going to the server to get this information, all of this information is now on your phone. This also only worked for the app. And so I think it was like a week or 2 weeks before we were planning to go, is when I finally was able to start on this feature. And it just wasn't enough time to make this feature fully work. It actually introduced quite a bit of bugs in the whole system. And I remember even on the train to the airport, I was trying to desperately fix a bug that was sort of hampering the whole flow, So that was a bit ugly. That was like a very stressful period because I was like, you don't want this product to fail. And especially, I would say even a month before this trip, I probably should have stopped developing anything major like this because it was just touching a lot of like the main components of the flow, which is like super important for us to work. So yeah, that was a bit of a scary thing because my testing framework, so I created this app and website, and around 5 years ago I did a bit of testing, like automated tests, but I basically gave up on that when I started working on this again. So I wouldn't know if something was broken until someone or I encountered it. And it usually wasn't me who encountered it. Like, I don't know if it was Faith or something, but usually it was Matt who encountered bugs. And that also didn't leave a good impression, for him. So I invested some time in creating some automated tests now, but especially like 2 weeks before such a major, because that was the main thing. Like, we were going to go to the Canton Fair and promote this app. So this app better work at the time. And I was still developing this offline feature like a maniac. And in the end, I made a bit of a decision to sort of like call it off and just make the online version work fine, which actually turned out to be fine in like, I would say 80% of the time. Like, I think about 20% or maybe 15% of the time, the internet was indeed spotty and we couldn't really do a full demo of the app. But like 80 to 85% of the time it did work. And so I'm pretty happy with that result personally, because this offline feature was like a lot more difficult than I thought personally. And also it was very difficult to debug because it only worked in the app. And the way that the app works with Capacitor is that if I want to carry out any update, so like I have like some debugging code in there, I would have to wait like 15 to 30 seconds for my whole app to build, and then wait another like 10 seconds to load it on my phone. So that was just like a very slow and sluggish process, which if you develop a website, you just create some changes in the code, save it, and then usually it auto refreshes or even like has some like hot module reloading. So it's like instant changes are reflected on the website. And with the app, that's just not possible currently. I think there are some ways to get it done with the Capacitor, but it was just a very slow and sluggish process to fish out these bugs. I had to put in like a lot of like console log statements, like logging statements, and then like build it again and then test it on my phone. And then turns out I have to change this and this and then build it again. And it was just a very slow process. So that's, I think, one of the first learnings that I had of this trip was just before this trip, when I was still working on this offline feature, which in the end was not working too well. But hey, it wasn't the end of the world for sure. So that was nice. So anyways, I was on the train to the airport trying to fix these bugs. And then when I arrived at the airport, I was kind of like, all right, the main flow works for the online version, so let's just roll with that, Let's just focus on all of the other things that we were going to do during this trip, and let's not focus too much on these bugs. And so yeah, for the first, I think 1 or 2 days, I was still pretty nervous. I met Matt. I think we both arrived like around the afternoon or in the evening, drove to our hotel, did a bit more debugging because the item search wasn't working too well. And yeah, I remember the first night I was a bit tense because Matt was also saying that some of his friends were going to try the app, like some people that I also met in April, so I also knew them. But he basically pitched the app in a meeting when he went to their factory. And so this app was going to be put to use on day one, which was a bit scary, but also quite exciting. Like, I remember in the night, like, he was sending out all of the invites to everybody. So he was using the app like good, like he was really quickly like sending out invites. And I remember making this reference of like, like it felt like he was like, I created this table, like just like a physical table, like I screw it together. So I knew how strong this table was, which I don't know, like was strong, wasn't too strong. I felt like it wasn't the strongest, as strong as it could be. And but a lack of time and that sort of stuff caused that. And so it felt like I created that table and Matt was like jumping on it like crazy. You know what I mean? Like he's jumping on that table, testing it out, trying all of the things. And I was like, I hope this holds. Like I'm like, please don't break. You know what I mean? Which is pretty funny. I think that's definitely a developer sort of thing. I've seen a couple memes here and there where it's like, a developer, like developing an app is like a baby, like, it holds it like this. And then if you have like the customer or the user using the app, it's like throwing the baby out, because it's like, yeah, that's sort of how it is. But that was quite funny. So we were able to sort of set everything up for this person, for this factory, which was good. And we went to bed. And we were just going to wait what the next day was going to bring to us. I remember thinking like, oh, maybe I should just stay with the booth and make sure that everything runs smoothly and correctly for them. Because, yeah, I thought that they were going to use the app. But yeah, when we woke up the next day, I remember on the bus to the Canton Fair, we discovered one bug in one of the accounts. So the first thing we had to do at the Canton Fair was like fix this one bug, which was pretty funny. And then we went to this booth and it was a bit vague, like they sort of knew about the app, but we slowly got the feeling that like they didn't really they weren't really going to use it. Like they had their own sheets, they had their own sort of system set up, and that was sort of like what they were going to roll with. So it actually wasn't their main booth. It was like a different like side booth. And and the problem was that they, like, in order for our app to work, you need to have your whole item inventory in it. So you need to have like all the items that are on display in your booth need to be also logged in the app. And so the night before, we were inputting all of the data that they gave us for this one booth. But it turns out they only gave one section. They only gave like one side, like only like 30% of the items. So if you have a customer that wants this one product that is in the item inventory, but this other product that is not in the item inventory, then you won't be able to create a quote because you're missing the critical information for this one item. So then we were kind of like, you know what? This is not really going to work out. And we just decided to roam around the Canton Fair and start to do a bit of marketing. It turns out this kind of saved our asses because later we went back to the booth and we sort of did like a test run with this one section of items that were there. And the item search, man, the item search was crap. It was not working well. Whenever you typed in like a part of the SKU, because all of the SKU numbers had the same starting line, but they had a different ending, you had to put the whole SKU number in there, which was quite a long number in order for it to work, which can be quite cumbersome. Like you only want to be able to sort of fill in the numbers that are different and be able to get the hit for your item. And so this wasn't working at all. Or I think it was actually the other way around, where you fill in that specific number for the item and just the whole item inventory came up. Like all of the items, not sorted or anything like that. And you had to scroll down to find your item. So it was just unusable. You weren't able to find the correct item, which is like a critical feature of the app. So yeah, kind of saved our asses there. That's which, you know, it was both a bad and a good thing, I guess. I might have been able to fix it in like a day or so, but this was quite valuable time to be on the floor, like on the show. So then we just sort of went ahead and just roamed around the show, which is a very cool thing to do. Like if you've never been to like the Canton Fair or like a big trade show, it is pretty special. Like you have all of these different booths which sort of give you a little insight into a factory or like a trade, what do you call it, like a trade company who sources from different factories. And you just get this representation of like how the whole import-export world is looking like how it all works. So it was very, very interesting. I hope to be able to come back again someday to that show. So the first 2 days, I think, other than what happened here, we were just hitting the ground, talking to people, and looking at different use cases, different ideas for the app. We were just avidly making notes. And we were also sort of like doing some sales. So we were going up to booths and basically we had this sort of like sales pitch, and giving huge props to Matt here because he was mostly the one talking. Like he was the one sort of setting things up, and only if there were questions or specific things, like I would sort of jump in. I really like the dynamic. I think it went pretty well. He is quite an extrovert guy, and I'm more of an introvert guy. Like I don't really like to do like most of the talking, but I think the dynamic was pretty cool. So we were able to talk to quite a few people, but our sales pitch was lacking something. We quite quickly noticed this because every time, like, so we had this, I cannot show the folder. Let me show something else. So this is the folder right here. So I had this fanny pack, like I had this like shoulder bag on, and I had some like folders stowed in there as well as some business cards. So every time we would come up to someone and then we would talk about like, oh, how's the show going, this sort of stuff. Then we would say like, oh, we actually create an app, and then I would come out with the folder, which, you know, it lists all of the features. Like it's just like a very almost like standard sort of like sales folder, just like a one pager, with a preview of all of the features, what the app is about, that sort of stuff. And so what happened was, as soon as we sort of like got this folder out, people just totally changed their attitude. Like it went from friendly and interested to like, nah, I don't want this. Like as soon as they sort of got that you're trying to sell them something, it turned the whole situation to like, sometimes they would outright ignore us. Like, it would be like we were talking, having a good conversation, and then as soon as they knew like we were not there to buy, but we were there to sell, they would be like shut off and sort of be like, okay, thank you, bye, like that, like, don't waste my time anymore. Which was pretty frustrating. It was pretty frustrating. I remember Matt being quite frustrated by that, because just every time that we got this response, it was a bit sad, because like, we knew that this app was going to be helpful, or at least Matt was fully confident that this app was going to be helpful for pretty much all of the factories that we approached, because it was like a quote engine. Like, you can create very professional quotes for people, so it was a very helpful thing. But he was just like, how can we emit this message to these people? Like, that was the hard part. Like, how can we sort of transmit this idea and make sure that they get the same idea? And so I think it was the second day we went home quite defeated, just feeling a bit down that we were not really making any results, like any tangible results. And we slept on it for a bit, and Matt talked to Annie about it as well. Like, how can we sort of like improve this, or what can we do to change? And then Annie came up with like a very good idea, which was actually going to these booths and then pretending to be a buyer instead. So you're not gonna go there with the intention of trying to sell them this app, but instead you're gonna go there as what they want. Like, they want interested buyers. So we would go there as interested buyers, or play like it, or sometimes not even play like it, because sometimes there would be products that would be quite interesting. So that's how we changed the approach on the next day. And I remember we arrived at the fair, and I think we did a few pitches, and it was like night and day. It was a total 180 degree change in the reaction. Like, it was pretty insane, actually. Like, what we did is we went there as buyers, and we would basically use our own app as sort of like how would you say that? As sort of like our own inventory. So we would have all of the item information. We would ask it on the spot. It was quite a long pitch, because like before you would just like have the sales sheet out. You can be done in 10 minutes. Now some of these interactions would take 30 minutes to an hour, which is not a bad thing, because if your conversion rate goes from, I don't know, 0% to 50% or more, then that's an hour well spent, So that was quite a change. And it actually had multiple benefits, not just the fact that the people that we interacted with were a lot more interested in what we had to offer, but also just the fact that we were using and putting our own use to app. Like, I think, and in developer terms, we call this eating your own dog food, is huge. Like, we're also doing this at my day job, which is like, we have this like webinar streaming platform. And we also do our daily meetings in this platform, because it's so important to use your own product. It's quite interesting, because as a developer, you're actually like, I would say I'm not using my own product enough, or like not too much. Like, as a user, you're going through the app, you're testing things out, and as a developer, you're testing it, but you're usually only testing a very isolated part, what you're working on, and you're not testing everything together. Because that's like, for me at least, that's like a harder thing to do. Like, I like going through code and doing all of that like sort of stuff, but going through the actual flow and going through the app and testing it out, no, like, I would like someone else to do it, like a quality assurance person, or like a UAT, like a user acceptance tester or something like that, like, I don't want to do that myself. But in this case, it's very important for me to do it, because I'm the only one working on it, So, but in this case, we could use our own app to sell itself. So we were going to these booths, we were putting their item information into it. And what happened is, in the end, they got to see the results. So they've seen a couple of the items that we put in for them, and they can see their items on like a nice spreadsheet, or like a nice sheet that we create for them. So that was amazing. That was like such a big shift in the attitude of people. Which is really cool. It taught me a lot about sales, because it's so important to know how you approach people, and especially as an introvert myself, this is something that I rarely really do or have experience with. Like I don't really talk to a whole lot of people, like especially here in Taiwan. My social circle is very small. Like I just have my fiance here, and occasionally we go to church where I have a few friends. But especially where I live right here, I don't have that many people I interact with on a daily basis. And then you go to a Canton Fair where you can speak to like, I don't know, 100 or 200 people on a day. Like you can speak to a lot of people. And I would say I'm quite proud of myself for being able to sort of do that and not feel totally burned out, because I didn't. Like, especially after this like third day when we changed our sales pitch and got like a very different result, I was very confident in myself. Like I was like, oh, I can sort of do this sales pitch myself. And I did. Like there were times where me and Matt would split up and we would sort of like take our own aisle and sort of like go our own ways. And it was cool. It was amazing. Like that was a very good turn of events. So yeah, I would say the rest of our time at the Canton Fair was sort of marked by this moment. We kept doing these pitches and we started to approach different item categories, because each item category sort of had their own like use cases, which was very interesting. Like one of the features we, for example, don't have is sets. So for example, someone is selling a pan set. So you have like 3 different sizes of a pan. And so we would just approach them and we would still put in their data in our app. We would sort of think about flows to make it easier to put in these sets into the app. Another use case was in our app, you can also fill in packing material. And there were times where the packing material was like a trolley. So it wasn't actually like a box or anything like that. It was just a trolley. And we were like, okay, so how would it work if your packing material is just that? You know what I mean? So there was just a lot of cool interactions, a lot of things that I learned. And even a lot of things that I was kind of like sort of inspired by. Like there were these product categories that were like, oh, very cool. Like I could even make, I don't know, some kind of like product that I could brand and then sort of sell overseas or something like that. Like there was just so many different ways we could sort of take this experience, because it was like a lot of lessons learned for this app, but also a lot of lessons learned for like how the import-export world works in general, which was very cool. So yeah, then, so this all happened during phase 2. So we were there for phase 2 and 3 of the Canton Fair. We had a couple days like rest in between where we went to Hong Kong, because I couldn't stay in China for more than 2 weeks at a time. So we went to Hong Kong I think we wanted to go by train, but then we ended up going by taxi because it was like the same price. Had a fun time in Hong Kong. We went to like a small island, did some hiking there, which was amazing. And then we actually went back to the Canton Fair by boat, which was like a 3-hour ferry from Hong Kong directly to the Canton Fair, which was a crazy ferry. Like we went up this river, which is like, if you look at the map of things, you see Hong Kong, which is like at the bottom, right? Like right on the coast. And then on the China side, you have like Shenzhen, which is a huge city, Dongguan and Guangzhou, which are like 3, I don't know, tens of millions of people are living in this in this one area alone. But all of these cities are sort of like almost merged together. And then you have this river like right running through it and going into the heart of Guangzhou. And like this ferry was crazy because there were parts of this where for like, I think a good hour on both sides of the banks of the river, there would be ports and there would be these like lorries for the containers, like to load on the boats. And it would be nonstop, like it wouldn't end, like it would just be container ships after container after harbors, like the scale of things in China, which is something that I especially saw on this trip was insane. Like, if people sometimes say like, oh, like all of this manufacturing, it's going to move from China to like cheaper countries like Indonesia or Vietnam. Honestly, I don't think so, because China's got everything. China's got the factories, they've got the infrastructure set up. They've done it right. Like they have set themselves up to be a real global leader in all sorts of ways, because like all of our products are currently made in China, which I was able to see personally right there. That was pretty crazy. And so we arrived back at the Canton Fair. Like the ferry terminal was like right opposite from the Canton Fair. It was pretty crazy. And then we were also at the Canton Fair for the third phase. Third phase was also pretty interesting. I think it had like office supplies, lots of clothing, like shoes and clothes, which for our app is a bit more difficult because you're working with like sizes and stuff. But we still went out and explored and talked to people and that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, I don't know if we spent like all of our time at the Canton Fair during this time. Oh, yeah, we also went to some neighboring fairs because the Canton Fair is like the main show, but there were a lot of like spin-offs. So, for example, you had the Jinhan Fair, which was like across the street. And you also had like another one, which was like, that was like a budget Canton Fair. Like that was like a bit of a rundown Canton Fair. Also a lot less people, a lot more like just like bare bones rundown, which was actually pretty interesting because our app is not like our audience. I would say is not like very big factories. It's mostly one of these like smaller factories that may not have the funds to like invest in a huge software solution, but can, for example, invest in us, which just does one part of the whole software solution in a very good way, like better than all of the other parties do. And actually, I even had a conversation with someone who did buy one of these software solutions and actually would buy our solution as well because they thought it was like better in some ways, So yeah, this was quite interesting. Like we had a whole range of factories because like also the Canton Fair, if you go into a hall, you have like the main walkway. And then all of like the most expensive booths are like on the aisle, like they're right on that corner. And then if you go a bit to the back of the hall and into like the small aisles, that's where you'll see the smaller companies. And those were usually the ones that we were trying to target with our app. So we just talked to like all ranges of people. And also these spin-off fairs were quite interesting to visit as well. So I think that basically concluded much of our Guangzhou experience. We spent most of our time at the Canton Fair there, but we weren't done yet because during our time at the Canton Fair, which by the way only happens twice a year, we were talking to some people and some of these voices sort of pointed us to a different fair, which was called the Yiwu Trade Fair. I think that's what it's called. I don't know. I think it's actually called Yiwu Trade City. Because this is not just a one-time event. What's happening in Yiwu, which is a city in Zhejiang province in China, it's like a trade show 24/7, 365 days a year. Like it's a trade show that never stops, basically. Actually, I don't think it's like all year round because they will definitely take a break during Chinese New Year. But during the rest of the year, the rest of the time of the year, that is a trade show that is happening like all the time. So for our app, we only really had a use case that was happening like twice a year, which was fine, but a lot of people were saying that maybe going to this trade city was going to be better for us because these are people that are going to need something like this every day of the year. And so in the beginning, this whole Yiwu Trade City wasn't even on our radar, but just by being at the Canton Fair, people were starting to point to this location. And so what we did is after the second phase of the Canton Fair, we flew to Ningbo, China, which was Matt's hometown for 10 years. He's lived there for 10 years doing import-export. And it was very interesting because actually I met him through YouTube. I was following his YouTube channel about like 7 or 8 years ago. And at that time, he was living in China. So he was uploading videos from Ningbo, from this hometown. So even though I've never been to this place, I had a special connection to this place through his vlogs. Like I knew specific locations and we walked around the city and there were times I was just like starstruck or something because like this was the location that, for example, he crashed his drone into a river. You know what I mean? And like later he went into a wetsuit and was able to pick it up. And so I was like, oh, this is the exact location where that happened. Like I was a bit starstruck at the time and Matt was a bit weirded out by it, which makes sense. But yeah, that was very cool, very interesting, very cool experience. I also met his wife's family there, which was very, very interesting, very cool. They were all amazing people. Also in the factory business, like a lot of them were factory owners as well. And in the end, like towards the end of the trip, we had this huge like hot pot dinner with like his with like the whole family there, and they had this huge round table which was like automatically rotating with all of like the dishes, and then you had your own like little hot pot on the side so you can just grab things and put them in the hot pot and eat them up. That was very cool. That was amazing. Had a few drinks there as well. Had some baijiu, which I've never had before. So that was an amazing experience as well. So yeah, I think this trip was definitely like, it sort of had, well, it had one main purpose, but we also did a lot of travel and exploring. Like that was, I guess, sort of like a side spin-off purpose for this trip as well. We went to a lot of places, especially when we arrived in Ningbo, because from Ningbo we went straight to Yiwu, which I'll get to in a second. And from there we went to Guangzhou, which is like one of the oldest cities in China. Has a lot of history. We only spent like a day here, which, you know, maybe a bit too short to really explore all of Hangzhou, but we saw like West Lake, and I had some less good experiences here because someone almost touched my lower part of the body, and there were a few people, just a few strange people that I encountered during my time in Hangzhou, which probably doesn't have to do anything with Hangzhou. It was probably just coincidence, but Matt was able to make a fun vlog out of it, which I'll link if you want to see that. But so yeah, Hangzhou, and I think from Hangzhou we went straight back to Ningbo. And then after Ningbo, we still had a day in Shanghai as well. So we were able to see even Shanghai, which I've never been to before, which was really cool as well. So yeah, we saw a lot of things during this trip. But yeah, so basically the second part of the trip, which was when we went to Ningbo, and then we spent a couple of days in Yiwu, which Yiwu is an interesting city. It has definitely a very different vibe from, like, you could say like an A-tier city of China, like Guangzhou or Shanghai. It is a bit more rundown. It is a bit more China, you know. It's a bit more rough, a bit more, you know, a bit more real, as you could say, maybe, because like all of these big cities are like, you know, big buildings, a bit more polished. This was a bit of a less polished place, but I also felt like this was a place where shit was getting done. You know, like this was a place where where people were doing trade and business. You know, like that's what I really felt like Yiwu was. And so on the first day when we arrived in Yiwu, we went straight to check out the fair, which was broken up into different buildings. And I don't know, like I think we went to like the main, or I don't know if it was the main building or like one of the side ones. And we dove into the world of Yiwu, which is a world like we sort of got our hands on the Canton Fair, and we were sort of starting to figure out how the Canton Fair was working out. And then we got to Yiwu, which was like, you know, if the Canton Fair is like close to our understanding, like around here, Yiwu was like here. Like we had no idea what Yiwu was. I mean, Matt has been there actually a couple times, so he probably knows a bit more than me at least. But wow, this was quite the place. Like, very different. All of the booths there are rented, and they're probably going to be there year round. Like the Canton Fair is very temporary, right? So it's like it's only a couple days a year. So the booths there are just like these makeshift ones. But the Yiwu booths are just like proper rooms, you know, like proper small little booths. And I also felt like it was a lot more practical. Like it was also just like logistics being done from the booths. So it was like, it was not just to show off the products, but it was also to like really make deals and maybe even fulfill orders from there. Or I guess maybe not all of these booths were like that, but some of them had like a lot of stock there. Or maybe just like a stock of samples, I'm not sure. And what we also noticed is like the level of English was a lot lower, you know, like these people were more, were definitely more like into the China world, I feel like the Canton Fair is really China and then like displaying it to other countries. And I feel like Yiwu was kind of also doing that, but they were more, I think, because their level of English was so much less, there were a lot more agents. So you have like a Western person who wants to source from Yiwu, they would hire like an agent who would then go to these fairs in Yiwu and make deals. And these agents can actually become very important in the story because they might be the ideal people to promote our app to these factories owners too. So yeah, we were there. I think we went to the fair like 2 or 3 days, maybe 2.5 days. But we kind of felt a bit like this is getting, you know, like our app is definitely not ready for this, you know, or maybe our way of marketing is not ready for this. I remember the first day we were like a bit hesitant to like sort of ask for quotes and do that sort of stuff. In the end we did. and we got a bit of like mixed results. It was definitely a lot harder to sort of like do the whole pitch and get like the right reaction as it was in the Canton Fair. But it was still a very interesting experience. Like it was pretty crazy. Also, these Yiwu halls are huge. Like I remember on the first day, like we had this hall which was like a slowly bending curve, so you couldn't see the end. And then at some point it opened up into like a huge building where you would look in one direction and you couldn't see the end. You would just see booths and you couldn't really make out the end, because people would be walking around and you just couldn't see the end. And then you would start to look to your right, and then it was the same thing. Like another hall where you just wouldn't see the end. So you have like two directions of halls where you wouldn't see the end, and then you just know how big this place is. It is huge. And it is multiple stories. Like it's not just one story, it's like 4 or 5 stories, So like I think in terms of numbers, the Canton Fair hosts like about 20,000 booths, but the Yiwu Fair hosts like around 70 to 80,000 booths, So it was big. Like that is a big place with a lot of commerce going on. Very interesting place. I would really want to come back there. Actually, if I'm thinking about like creating my own brand or something like that, I think this would be the ideal place to go and really source my products and that sort of stuff. So I don't think I'll have visited that place enough. Like I'll probably come back there again sometime in the future. So yeah, Yiwu was very interesting. We also met up with someone that we met at the Canton Fair there, and he was able to share a few of the insights of Yiwu, and so we gathered a lot of information. I think that was like the main thing during this trip, is we gathered a lot of information, learned a lot of lessons, but the overall conclusion with our app, I think was that we were just not quite there yet. Like we weren't quite there yet. So we'd have to go back to the table a bit more, do a bit more work. And I'm actually going to go into that in the next episode. So the third episode, the last one of this series, I'm kind of going to talk about, because this all happened in October and November of last year. Right now it is March. So it's like the next year. The next Canton Fair is in April. I don't think Matt is going. Maybe he is. Like he is probably listening. So tell me your plans, Matt. But I think for now the app is going to lay low just a little bit because of other circumstances. And which is a bit sad, to be honest, but that's how it is. That's how life goes, right? So we have a few other things going on, and in the next episode, I'm probably going to talk about the sort of like post this trip, sort of like what sort of went down, and talk about what I'm currently going to be focusing on a bit more, which is something that I haven't really been focusing on since the start of doing Tice's Tech Track. So we're going to bring back some old projects, which is going to be very interesting and exciting. But yeah, I still think that this trip was maybe a little bit life-changing, Like it was definitely an eye-opening experience. I have no regrets whatsoever. Like this was a really cool trip. I learned a lot of lessons and had a great time overall. Thank you, Matt, as well, of course. Like he's sort of the one that, thought of the app idea to begin with. And yeah, it was a really cool experience. Also thanks to Matt's wife, Annie, of course, who was able to show me the nooks and crannies of the Canton Fair back in April last year, which was very interesting. And I think we'll be back. I think this story is going to continue. But yeah, we're also going to have some other things to focus on. So in the next episode, I'll go into that. I'll go a bit more into my current situation, where I'm currently at, and where this project is going to fit in there. And yeah, that's about it for this episode. So I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've ever been to the Canton Fair, by the way, or like the Yiwu Fair or anything like that. Let me know if you've never been there and you are also interested, or you'd like to know more. I would love to talk a bit more about that as well, because it was really cool. But yeah, so in the next episode, we're going to talk a bit more about the current situation and what might be coming up very soon. So exciting stuff. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. If you were listening this on Spotify, that's very cool, because I have very little listeners on Spotify. I think the last episode just got like 1 or 2 plays, which is not a lot, but oh well, I still like posting it on there. Also, if you're listening and you're not yet subscribed, please subscribe. That would be very cool if you would be able to subscribe to Tice's Tech Track. I'm going to try to be a bit more consistent. I'm not sure if that's going to work out. I do want to at least carry out one episode every 2 months. Like, that's sort of like my minimum requirement, and do that for a year. So let's see how that's going to go. But I basically want to create an episode every time I learn something, or I go through something, or something comes on my path that has to do with this journey to financial freedom, because I'm not there yet. There's still a long way to go. But there are a lot of opportunities out there, especially, what I've learned from China as well. There's a lot of things you can do. And we're slowly going to focus on some of these things. So very exciting stuff. Thank you for listening, and I will see you all in the next episode. See you later. Bye-bye.